So today, folks, we're going to talk about the killer algae blooms of the lakes of New York. The killer algae blooms of the state of New York. And of course, we're going to talk about the pinhole and the bathtub on Lake George. The pinhole and the bathtub. And yes, we're going to use plenty of the scientific evidence for this discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the historical record reveals that there are hundreds and hundreds of state authorities, federal authorities, lots of federal authorities, from the Department of the Interior, the United States Coast Guard, and the Environmental Protection Agency, that are very well aware of the fact that there were over 1.5 million cubic yards of mill waste and human effluent. Let's use the nice word today. Let's not use the poo-poo word. 1.5 million cubic yards of toxic, poisonous mill wastes, and the poo-poo and caca all mixed together with a whole bunch of other chemicals and, you know, everything that goes down the open sewers of Ticonderoga and the international paper companies' dumping operations into the poop chute, the old poop chute river. Now, you know, poop chute river, that is what you call scientific evidence. Newspapers, magazines, television stations, the U.S. Supreme Court. Can you imagine that? The United States Supreme Court. Several courts of the state of New York, several district attorneys, several county attorneys, several state attorney generals, and others know for a fact that the flushing, the lowering and the raising and the flushing and the refilling and then the dumping and, you know, so on and so forth, with the pinhole in the bathtub is enormously memorialized and recorded in the records of the state of New York and the records of the United States government. Now, folks, according to all the authorities that I just mentioned, large amounts of property damage were done on Lake George as a direct result. Islands, shoreline, seawalls, or what's known as bulkheads, boathouses, let's not forget the boat, and lots of docks got wiped out for year after year after year after decade after decade after decade after decade. Actually, this went on for almost a century and a half, even longer, that the ice sheet, the ice cover, and the water levels in Lake George are pumped up and down and up and down and so on and so forth, destroying docks, boathouses, islands, shoreline, and seawalls. Lots of property damage that they knew doggone well was going on. The people who control and operate the pinhole in the bathtub and the Dam 230, Dam A, are the Department of Environmental Conservation of the state of New York. The state of New York owns and operates that dam, especially since the International Paper Company has moved north of Ticonderoga up on Lake Champlain, where they continue to dump large amounts of mill waste and effluent into Lake Champlain. Gee, golly whiz, Lake Champlain is massively polluted. It's been going on for a long time. Same thing in Glens Falls and Hudson Falls and Fort Edward. They're constantly dumping into the Hudson River feeder canal, or what's known as the Glens Falls feeder canal, and dumping into the Hudson River above where the water goes into the Champlain Canal. Runs from the Hudson River up to South Bay on Lake Champlain, all up through Washington County, Kingsbury, and Whitehall. Bottom line, the southern tier of Lake Champlain is a big mess, and it's been a big mess for many decades because the Department of Environmental Conservation of the state of New York and the state of New York itself are the biggest polluters in the state. City of Glens Falls dumps lots of sewage into the Hudson River every time their sewage plant that's wholly inadequate. Wholly inadequate. Imagine that. It's too small. It can't handle the sewage and high water runoff at the same time, and it fails constantly, and they're constantly dumping lots of sewage into the Hudson River. Same thing in Ticonderoga. Same thing in Lake George. And let's not forget all those septic tanks. Now, folks, the historical government records reveal, and in particular, the Lake George Park Commission's reports and records and research shows that the septic tanks, thousands of them all around Lake George, ultimately leach down to the bedrock and into the water, groundwater, and ultimately all of this leachate drains into the Lake George Basin, the bowl, the Lake George Bowl. And no, I'm not referring to the one up on the south end of town there on Canada Street on 9N, Route 9N. I'm not talking about the Lake George Bowl behind the Prospect Diner. I'm talking about the basin, the 242 square mile Lake George Basin, where all these septic tanks and, sewage, leachate, eventually drains into Lake George, which they have been flushing for decades to keep the lake halfway clean, using the big flush system, the big pinhole in the bathtub. I find it quite interesting that the state authorities would refer to Dam A as a pinhole. Wholly inadequate, wholly undersized, holy smokes, too small drainage spillways that the United States Army Corps of Engineers and Stetson engineering firms that the state hired, they claim that the release capacity and the spillways are 54% too small. In other words, they're only 46% capable of doing their job in maintaining the lake level. So, as David Wick and Roger Smith of the Lake George Park Commission have stated numerous times, they have to draw down the lake prematurely. They got to do this thing called wintertime drawdown. And then, of course, the ice freezes when the water's low, and into spring during runoff and things, that ice comes floating back up. And guess what that does to boathouses, docks, and shoreline and islands and seawalls? Well, it tears it and shreds it, and you get the picture. Now, folks, I'm going to sort of leave it right there. I've laid down the gauntlet, if you will. I've laid down the gauntlet with the state of New York. This destruction machine, the pinhole and the Dam A flusher gate there at Ticonderoga, is notorious. The records of the state and the records of the federal government, the courts, the news media, this Dam A nonsense is a notorious public nuisance. It's also known as a continuing nuisance. It's the cause and fact of vast property damage, which the owners and operators of this nuisance know damn well that damned Dam A is damn sure going to cause a lot of damage because it's inadequately engineered and built. It was built to harness the horsepower. It was built specially to make a lot of money for the mills by choking down the lake and releasing the water as slowly over the longest period of time that they could get it to engineer, to be engineered. Maximizing the profits and the horsepower to the mills, particularly International Paper and Power. The parent, corporation, the parent corporation of System Properties. You see, International Paper owned, wholly owned the System's property. And the dam, damned A, they're damned Dam A, the pinhole, the state of New York controls, has authority over it, and operates it. And in fact, in reality, they own the water rights. This whole nonsense of International Paper Company owned it, well, that's all kind of an inside job. An inside job of certain very interesting judges that ruled on those cases. They had pecuniary interests in the Glens Falls banks, the investors or financiers behind the pinhole. So folks, Sheriff Rand, not Sheriff Rand, oh God, what's his name up there? Oh, boy, I gotta tell you. Can't think of his name right off the top of my head. Warren County Sheriff Bud York, there we go. Getting old, for a little brain freeze there. Sheriff Bud York, District Attorney Carasone, Major James LaFar, and Amy Bartlett, the old Warren County attorney, and the Warren County supervisors need to understand something. Dam A, dam number 230. Let's see, we got it here. Dam 230 caused huge amounts of damage all over Lake George for decades. Many decades, going back to the earliest part of the 1900s. And all through the 1900s. Every winter, man, when they do that up and down, up and down, up and down nonsense with the ice cover and the water levels, that's when the docks and the boathouses and the islands and shoreline all get torn up. Look for the links below. I've provided plenty of links. There's no problem with finding the records. I've posted huge amounts of photographs that reveal that the state judicial records and the state law enforcement records absolutely support the basis of this video. Folks, there's nothing more I can say. Leaving it right there. As always, hasta la vista, and you betcha, for sure, no question about it, we're definitely, positively coming back.